Here's a story that I never shared with anybody on camera or otherwise ever about the night that Biggie died at the Petersen Museum. I've never talked about this publicly, but you're asking me. I was there the night Biggie was killed. And from my perspective, I kind of saw it, the writing on the wall, developing while I was sitting there. I was in the party. I was at the party prior to any Bad Boy arriving. That was actually the last time I saw Aaliyah. I knew Aaliyah through Barry Hankerson before she blew up. And so that was the first time I saw her since she was a little girl in one of our plays. But nonetheless, that night I was sitting on the dance floor, and I'm living in on the West Coast for some time. I recognized when, people throwing up signs now, and they were doing it a little bit heavier and emphasizing it a lot more once Bad Boy came in, and they were directing it towards Bad Boy. West Coast, throwing up signs and looking over there, as some people described that in one of your interviews. I saw a gentleman describe that they were ice grilling at them. It was Styles and him, and they were ice grilling them. In the Dame Grease interview that you guys did, Dame Grease said him and Styles saw some people ice grilling him. I was there that night, and I saw the same ice grilling that he described it. I just saw that they were looking over there like, yo, these cats think that shit is sweet out here. And everybody was on their phones. Cellular phones were just becoming popular out there. So people were on their phones making calls. And I feel like it was set up inside that party. That they were like, yo, he's here. Yo, he's sitting right there. He just think, yo, they here. That's my perspective, me being from East New York and knowing setups. That's how I took it. And the funny thing is, I didn't know Biggie. Even though he's from Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, I ain't know Biggie and none of the Bad Boys. I was out here on the West Coast with my career, so I knew all of the West Coast cats. So I'm sitting there looking, I'm like, yo, they doing a little extra. West Coast, yeah. And I'm like, yo, what's going on? So I look over, Biggie's sitting there. He's sitting surrounded, he's the center of attention, and everything is gravitating towards him. He's sitting there with a cane, which looked like a staff. He was in that Versace shirt, so he looked like he was a king in those shades, like he was just sitting there like he was the man, the king, and everything was gravitating towards him. So it almost looked like he was saying, y'all can kiss my ass, I'm in the building. When in fact, he had a broken leg and he couldn't move. So he was sitting there because he couldn't walk around the party like Puff was doing, like Stevie and all of them were doing. They were all bringing the girls and the bottles and the picture taken all to him. He was just sitting there, but to the outside, and as it looked like it was being instigated by those who was on the dance floor over here and going West Coast and throwing up the gang sign. There was a lot of gang members that I didn't even know they were gangbangers, because they didn't have the gang attire, because it was a Soul Train War party, so they had on suits and stuff, but it was a lot of stuff going on. I was like, yo, so I'm peeping it, and then it got shut down because of the fire, because it was too crowded. The fire department shut it down. And so they cut off all the music and everybody had to exit. Now, they were in there entirely too long, if you ask me, because if you had to make that appearance, you should have just walked in and walked out. Yo, what's up, blah, 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 and be out. But they didn't do that. They sat there and they enjoyed the festivities, and that was the wrong move. Because anybody who knows, you can't just be up in somebody's house. Whether you did it or not, whether you was associated or not, they think that you had part to do with one of that people's demise. They looking at you sideways, especially when you sitting in the house like you the man, unbeknownst to yourself, because you just sitting down, just trying to wait for everybody to leave. So Biggie was just sitting there, but it looked like Biggie was, I'm the man. Because he had his cane and he had everything gravitating towards him. And I believe that somebody in that building called up one of the people who was like, yo, it's that time. Yo, they sitting right there. Yo, they about to get out. And I think it was all set up in there. And so by the time I left right before them, there was another party that they was going to. I didn't want to go to that party. It was in the hills, and parking and getting up in the hills is kind of difficult. So I left and I went to the crib. By the time I got to the crib, I was at the Barham, the Oakwoods on Barham. By the time I got to the crib, I got the call. Yo, they just shot Biggie. But the funny thing is, In hindsight, I saw it all developing. Didn't realize it because didn't know that how deep it was, or how those West Coast chants, or how those phone calls that I saw people on, and I was always just quiet to myself. So I'm sitting there peeping everything. Like, yo, these cats over here, they getting a little bit rambunctious, and these cats over here, they looking at them or ice grilling, because I'm trying to see if it's about to go off in the club, because that's how it looked. It looked like they was ready to set it off in the club. Because the fire marshal shut it down, that never was able to happen, but it went on outside the club. So God rest his soul, Biggie, one of the most influential MCs, I think, of that era, of all time even. And it's unfortunate that through lack of communication, you had the demise of both Biggie and Tupac. I worked with Tupac through the All Eyes on Me, and it's funny, a funny story. Real quick before we get off it, I happened to be doing mix show promotions at the time of All Eyes on Me. I didn't realize the connection between Mr. C and Biggie. I didn't know all that. I didn't know the history. I call up Mr. C because he's a mixed show DJ, and I said, yo, I got a new song of Tupac. He did some Biggie Smalls. I was sending all the records out to California. I was promoting it out there to New York, to my New York cat. Mr. C was like, man, I ain't playing that shit, and hung up on me. I didn't realize the backstory. Most of the other DJs that I played, they was like, send it, I can't wait to hear it. They wanted to play it, or they wanted to hear it. They hadn't even heard it yet. They wanted to hear it. And I was just sharing about it. But the funny thing is, Mr. C, I literally had called him trying to promote, hit him up to Mr. C on the radio. Mr. C, love you, pioneering the game, but I didn't know at the time, you know. Even though I'm from Brooklyn, I should have known, but I didn't. I was a little out there with that. But nonetheless, that night with Biggie was a tragic night. And I wish I would have known Biggie at that time, because I might have been able to share with him, like, yo, be careful or get up out of here, because these niggas is getting they're a little bit more festive than they usually are. They're a little bit more hyper, and they're a little bit more agitated than they usually are. And I think it's because y'all in here. And he might have been able to get out, but I didn't know the cat. And I did peep all of that. And I peeped it all in hindsight, because I didn't really, I saw the tension, but I didn't know it was to that magnitude, because I didn't know how deep that beef was between the parties, even though I worked with Interscope. I didn't know how deep. I didn't know how many people had already suffered through their crossing paths.